Thank you. Okay, there we go. Look at that. So for me, the thing that stuck the most was the cost of pursuing justice. What is the personal and professional cost for the tenacious pursuit of justice? And I think we saw a lot of that through the play, because you see that this is not just, in some ways, unraveled him professionally, right? He got this bar, he's waiting to come in to serve his sentence. And at the same time, you hear through the phone calls the toll that it's also taken in his personal life, right? And so the pursuit of justice, what is the cost of that? And the Kafka reference towards the beginning of the play made a strong impression on me, and kind of, I kept remembering it every time we kept unraveling this onion, right, where it was clear that, well, I think that the person who committed suicide in jail was the client, right, and the level of corruption that was involved in essentially railroading the case, right? So this notion of having to fight for justice against all of these odds, that really stuck with me, and it reminded me of some of the struggles that we have to do even today as lawyers in the real world, right? I mean, I run the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights here in Boston, and we're in many situations where we're up against really entrenched interests. And those entrenched interests could be business interests, right, like a pharmaceutical, or it could be just political interests and status quo that has gone unchallenged and unchecked for a long time. And when you start talking about this isn't working and we need to make some adjustments, or other people want to be a part of this conversation, want different results to come out, I think it could be really challenging to do that through either the court or policy advocacy, community engagement. It's challenging. It really is challenging. And so I think there are a lot of analogies that I could even think of from the cases that we have right now. But I think that theme of having to go up against really entrenched interests, powerful interests that are in control of either the political system or the judicial system, or who have the resources to be able to fight you in court when you might not be able to have those resources, when your client doesn't have access to those resources. I think that those are interesting themes from the play that you just did, Jay.
Yeah. It's this playwright too. I mean, you go even a layer down. It's great what you just did. That table that you set there is fantastic, because then you peel away another layer, and when you get, you're a lawyer and speaking from that aspect, but he's a writer who writes about the individual going into that good night. And in this particular play, it's law and entrenched interests. But in other plays, it's other things. But this is always a steady theme of his. And as we were talking, I kept thinking, gee, was there a fellow like you in Rome, who had your job in Rome and fought the system there, does it ever stop? It's always the way. The individual is always trying to fight that battle of the entrenched large things. And I'm a humanities man, so I come at it from that aspect. I look at the core of it, the classical themes of the play. But yeah, that's laid out perfectly.
I think the David versus Goliath is really,
it's so.
Yeah.
Do you know the other plays of the playwright? The last play that we did in Boston, we did a reading of a solo play, and it begins with David and Goliath. It's about King David, and that's where it starts. David fighting Goliath.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm gonna have to check it out. I didn't realize that that was part of the canon.
It's longer and it's a different type of piece because this, they all have different surfaces. When you look at one writer's work, there's a consistent theme as Kafka, you can read everything he wrote, and when you're done reading everything he wrote, you see that they're all about more or less the same ideas. They're just different aspects of it. Sobel has in him the individual versus the huge, versus the universe, the individual in the universe, dealing with what is for the time that individual is here. And so they pervade.
And in a way, it's also hopeful, though, right? Because at the end, when we see that there is there's a development that's happening with, the Swiss coming at this and other folks, it kind of reminds me, as a civil rights lawyer, right? I've been doing civil rights work for over a decade now. And sometimes I think that we see humanity at its worst, right? We see people like the good doctor, right, who was part of the play, who are whistleblowers, who are coming to us because they know that there's something wrong with the institution that they're either affiliated with or that they're working with, and they want to make sure that whether it's a product that is going to jeopardize consumer protection, or whether it's a form of really terrible discrimination that is happening in a particular institution, and they're going to blow the whistle and come forward and say, this is what management is doing to black people or to Jewish people, right? The point is, there are many, many forms of whistleblowing. And when you are in that position and you have to go to an organization like the Lawyers Committee to provide you with free legal support, if they even take your case, right? Because we don't take everything, right? And it's not like you're guaranteed.
It must be hard to turn them down.
And you do have to turn people down,
Sure.
right? Like you do, because at the end of the day, you have finite resources.
And you have to take the ones fights you can win, you have to take, or that you have a shot.
And I think just how difficult it is to even have the courage to be a whistleblower, to even have the courage to say, I am going to go public with this, I'm going to go to a lawyer and tell them that this type of discrimination is happening. That takes a tremendous amount of courage. And then to go somewhere where maybe they're going to say no to you, where they're going to say, we don't have enough evidence, or we don't have the resources to take this on, right? Because it can be. And it can be extraordinarily challenging when you are fighting from that David versus Goliath angle, right? Where you're trying to do the right thing, but the forces that you're up against have much deeper pockets, have much deeper connections that make that struggle all the more difficult.
Though it's funny that I think when you're in the trenches, you're the lawyer, you're the soldier, you're fighting the battle. The artist who observes it, and I think this playwright, my impression from the work, I've done now 2 of the plays. I watched the other one. There was a full production of one of those, I forget the name, Sinners, thank you. The Woman in the Sand and the execution that was coming. So I've experienced 3 of his plays, and I gotta say that I think that the overriding, the inner message that this artist wants to give the soldier as a gift is to remember that you're gonna win some, you're gonna lose some, you're probably gonna lose more than you're gonna win. But the victory is in the struggle. That the struggle itself is the reward, and I think that's this guy goes through what he's going, and there's no money anymore. Is there going to be a woman? Maybe. Is he going to get the girl? This guy is so screwed up with women, who the hell knows? But the fact that he's engaged in the good fight is in itself the stuff of humanity. That if you are in the struggle, if you're fighting, you win because you're fighting.
And you also have to be realistic enough to know that there is going to be a victory at the end, right? Like, I think I wouldn't be doing this work if I didn't realize that at the end of the day, you can get things done, that you can change hearts and minds, that you can make institutions accountable, that you can represent the voice for the little guy, for the community vis-a-vis those interests. And you might not always win, like you're saying, but you can often win. And I think that's also what keeps you going.
And
It's
you
not
can
just,
move the ball down the field.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But yes, we would love to hear from folks.
He's gonna,
Oh, yep. Jeff?
I was thinking about the play and its reference to the minister and the corrupt judge and the money and the business and all the aspects of that case. And I'm wondering, from an Israeli playwright, are there things happening in Israel that basically keyed off that notion of institutional corruption?
I can't, I'm not as familiar with the Israeli judicial system, so I can't speak to that. But you know, I was just on vacation with my husband in Colombia, and when we were in Colombia, there was actually a couple of headlines. Wait, that is where Bogota is. So I actually found it interesting, right? But east of Margarita. But one of the headlines was that the chief prosecutor, who was in charge of chasing corrupt figures and holding them accountable, had been himself found guilty of corruption, right? And so this idea that even the people who are in charge of eradicating, right, identifying these bad players and weeding them out, the person who was doing the weeding out was themselves being held accountable for corruption. And it really, it's great to see that even he's not exempt from that type of investigation, but it's also incredible to think that the entire judicial system could be so corrupt that at the very top you have people who are coming up in the news, right?
Yeah, this little shyster lawyer in Israel, he's got the line. He says, "What has happened to us?" He says, "What has happened to us?" You can't even get the Minister of Justice is like corrupt. What's happened to us?
So I don't
Us.
know.
He includes himself.
Yeah, and I don't know what's going on in Israel, but certainly in other countries there is that, and I think it also raises here within the states the idea of judicial independence, like how independent is the judiciary? How can we make sure that judges are a lot more independent and don't have these type of influences? In most states, judges are elected, right? Only federal judges are appointed. And even those appointments are made through the political process, right? So Trump gets to nominate his judges, right? His friends who are lawyers, his buddies, who share his judicial philosophy and view to the bench. And so this idea of judicial independence, right? When you think about it, even here in the States, when a judge has to be accountable to voters, you know, every so often when he's up for election, or when you are trying to get a federal judgeship and who you have to play nice with, right? I know that I will never get. Never. That's not in my cards. I'm way too controversial for that.
We'll keep our eyes on you. You're a young man.
I think that's why a guy invited me to participate here. He thought that I would find some of the content resonating with my practice. But I think I thought about that, and I thought about, like, you know, if you are really into the idea of, oh, maybe I would like to be a judge one day, maybe I would like a cabinet position one day. Those type of appointments don't go to people who are, you know, being rebel rousers, who are holding entrenched interests accountable and who are dragging people to court. Like, that's not the way you make friends, necessarily, as I've been constantly reminded by some people as I do my work.
I'd like to offer Evan Fallenberg a chance to respond to that question, because I think probably has some perspective. And after Evan speaks, I would want to make sure that we hear from the women in the room. So I would encourage the women to come up with a really good question as well. And bring that to the table.
Thank you. I was actually surprised that Yoshua Sobol took on this particular topic, because I think, I'm Israeli, and I think in Israel we have enough you know, hot topics to keep playwrights and audiences busy for a long time. But actually, one of the cleanest institutions in Israeli society is the judiciary. So that actually, over the course of the play, I was thinking about that, and also when Wendy introduced it, she said something about, and let's see, here's another play that will give us another aspect, perhaps, of another window into Israeli society, and I actually felt this wasn't a fair window. It seems like he created a situation for his own drama that doesn't, it's really not an issue that we grapple with in Israel. It's not in the news, and it's really generally considered to be the cleanest of the institutions in Israel. So that was kind of a disappointment.
Thank you. Is there a woman who'd like to ask a question, please? Lady, now's your chance. Louis Grossman.
Louise Grossman.
Looks pretty good.